Hey, it's me, Ryan. Welcome to another podcast on StartupCell.com. I wanted to do a video cast because I'm sitting here in my hotel room and I got some time to kill. And it's really been on my mind lately, this intersection between entrepreneurship and brain function modulation. For me, I can say that the last couple of years of building companies and trying to make this entrepreneurship thing work and really understanding myself, the strategy of building a company, how all that works, and then really how to get myself to perform better as a CEO and better in the position of trying to build future companies. It's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. It's like I've been really understanding that the way to do that is to pay very close attention to and spend a lot of time modulating for better performance, brain function. And I think that the garbage in, garbage out rule very much so applies to entrepreneurship in what you intake food-wise and chemical-wise and how that affects your output. So the garbage in, garbage out rule is like whatever you put into your body, whatever you put in, it's going to be, the commensurate levels of output are going to make sense. So if you just eat a bunch of, high sugary foods, then your output's going to be negatively affected because you'll probably be craving sugar a lot and you'll have dips in energy, etc. But if you eat a diet that gives you sustainable energy, like a high-fat, low-carb, something like that, then you'll probably have more energy and your output will be a lot better. The same is true at a much more granular level when you think about the brain and the brain's functionality. I think that technology and science and the internet, because it allows us to communicate faster, among many, many other reasons, has allowed evolution to happen in the area of how you can make the brain function better as it relates to entrepreneurship. And all this data that we're getting is making us look a lot more granularly at the levels of chemical messengers in our brain and some of the other chemical underpinnings of our functionality in a way that allows us to understand this stuff so we can modulate it, so we can affect it. And so one of the things that I think a lot of entrepreneurs should be conscious of, which I write about a lot and have been kind of yelling a lot about lately, and will continue to, I think is really one of the most important things to think about, is the brain neurotransmitter acetylcholine. Basically, a lot of the messages that your nervous system sends your brain and spinal cord in both neuromuscular movements, like moving your arms and then going and doing intense workouts, and then neurological stuff, like straight cerebral informational stuff. All those messages get sent via a neurotransmitter or a chemical messenger called acetylcholine. So this is like the predominant chemical messenger in the brain that, in sustaining focus and having good attention and reducing attention fragmentation, are majorly present. And so a lot of things deplete that brain messenger throughout the day, a lot of things, whether that's stress or if you're an athlete, it's exercise. You consume caffeine, and trust me, I got like a cup of espresso that I drank here, a mild bit of espresso, I was cutting it down. Even caffeine stimulates the release of acetylcholine in the brain, which means you need more of it. It's like everything, in addition to environmental factors and probably toxicity at many levels, are affecting this major brain chemical that is depleting throughout the day, which is responsible for, if you have high levels of it, really good focus and really good ability to sustain attention and really good mental fluidity, among other things. It's even implicated in behavioral change switch. Like when you change from one mode of behavior to another, the thing that gets released and the activation and the stimulation in your brain is acetylcholine. It's acetylcholine that gets stimulated and released when you change behavior. So all these really majorly important things, particularly behavioral mode change and then sustaining attention, have to do with the brain transmitter acetylcholine. And if it gets depleted all the time, then I think people should be conscious about what levels you should have. There's some studies, and I'm really trying to narrow these down and find them. They're really hard to find. But the initial studies that say how much choline intake via diet you should get, which by the way you can get in eggs and beef and some other foods, but probably not in the adequate intake, at least from my perspective. That study says here's the adequate amount. For men it's like 550 milligrams. I think for women it's like 425 or 475 milligrams of choline, which is a precursor of acetylcholine in the brain, a day. That study doesn't take into account, at least I don't think, depletion, right? And it may not take into account our current environment, which has a lot of demand, and also the environment of an entrepreneur. If you think about entrepreneurs and the demand that we put in our brain, right? And I think collectively we all agree upon the fact that we put much more demand on our brains, right? We're constantly having to think about how to keep the lights on in the beginning. The first couple of years of a startup, you're trying to figure out how to monetize and how to make the company make money, how you're going to save. If you don't have the finances to hire a COO and a team, and you're a CEO, you're a tech CEO or an otherwise company founder, and you are having to run the entire company. You're going to be the CFO, the CMO. You're going to think about how to build the company. You're the technical part of the company. And you maybe have one or two other people, working for you. You have a small team, but you need more people to do a lot of the tasks. You're going to be putting a lot of demand on your brain, so much demand on your thinking, right? You're going to be taking less breaks. You're going to be more stressed out. All this stuff depletes your ability to function really optimally and to do what you need to do as an entrepreneur. So considering environmental factors today in 2013, right, toxicity in the air, metals, etc., considering the demand that we put in our brains as entrepreneurs, which depletes acetylcholine, considering caffeine, which stimulates release of acetylcholine in the brain and kind of leaches it out of you and depletes it, considering all this stuff, and then considering if you're an entrepreneur or a productive person, most likely in a lot of cases you have an exercise routine which also burns acetylcholine, then thinking about how you can replenish this stuff is really paramount. I supplement with CDP choline, which is just one form of choline that builds acetylcholine in the brain. There's many. There's alpha-GPC, phosphatidylserine, phosphatidylcholine. Many of them contribute to different parts of acetylcholine. One of them will contribute to just the choline part of acetylcholine, and then you may want to consider getting acetyl L-carnitine, which makes up the acetyl version of acetylcholine in the brain. And I think that all that stuff is really important. Moving into the future, I've been taking this kind of futurist perspective, like Ray Kurzweil. Futurist, now he's the chief engineer guy or chief of engineering, head of engineering or something at Google. I've been taking the perspective of Ray Kurzweil a lot lately and thinking about the way that you're going to evolve mentally and the way that entrepreneurs, I think, are going to evolve mentally. The way that me as an entrepreneur has been able to evolve, and then moving forward, I'm going to sustain evolution and then continue to make my brain get better rather than have degeneration, is in thinking about reprogramming your neurobiology, if you will, right? If that's even the correct way of saying it, right? Reprogramming your neurochemistry, understanding that throughout the years that you have degradation of specific neurotransmitters and neurological functionality, that prefrontal cortex dysfunction, memory dysfunction, etc., starts to happen when you're 40, 50, 60, 70, maybe even earlier. I think it happens a lot earlier than that, and people just don't notice it. That if you have trouble grasping concepts, if you have trouble reaching for words, if you have trouble functioning, then something's wrong. It's not a normal thing to have brain fog. It's not a normal thing at all. To have memory recall issues, etc., that stuff's not normal. And so treating it, paying attention to it, and as you think about being functional as an entrepreneur and having good brain performance to build your companies and make your stuff happen, I think thinking about how to take a kind of Ray Kurzweil approach in reprogramming your neurochemistry is a good thing. If your neurochemistry is at a baseline level programmed to start degrading at the age of 23 over time, then 23 is when you should probably start taking supplements to make sure that you're getting proper precursors to build those neurotransmitters that are depleting over time. If you are getting a lot of demand from your brain, and it's creating stress, and then among the many other things that we have to deal with in our modern times, is depleting the brain chemicals that make you focus and allow you to sustain attention, allow you to think, allow you to have good brain function. You need to start supplementing with things or putting the raw things in your body to make those things that you can balance out the deficit there, prevent the deficit, and keep a surplus. The last point I want to make is the framework that you have about what food does and what chemical intake does to your brain and how it affects you really affects your philosophy on and then your execution on my advice and then anything around this area. So in other words, if you think about I think an optimal way as an entrepreneur, as a real productive person moving forward trying to build a lot, to think about garbage in, garbage out, chemical intake and how it affects you, modulating attention networks, modulating prefrontal cortex function in the brain, modulating in general brain function as a result of chemical intake, food intake, etc. The way to think about that is that if you believe in human biology, if you believe in evolutionary biology, human evolution, how our brains and how the organisms of our body evolved, then it's from consumption of things, right? There's a lot of studies pointing to a lot of the evolution of the human brain happening via consumption of meat and fish. There's a lot of evidence pointing to, and I have a thesis that a lot of the human brain, particularly fatty acid, a lot of the fatty acid part of our brain, which is a lot of our brain is DHA, and a lot of it's affected by fatty acids, were affected by coconuts, for example. I mean, if you know coconut oil and coconut oil supplements, and even MCT oil has this profound effect on prefrontal cortex dysfunction, like almost indicating that we evolved eating those foods, and it built up a lot of our brains. If you think about evolution in that way, that we ate foods, we ate things, we combined with other elements on the planet, and that made us what we are. And if you think about food and what you eat, it's the same thing, right? If you eat high carb, you're going to have like dips in energy and sugar levels, and you're going to crave sugar, and it's going to affect your performance. If you have high fat and low carb, you're going to have better sustainable energy throughout the day, right? If you consume a lot of grass-fed steak, you're going to have a high content of omega-3s, probably a better ratio of omega-6 and omega-3. You'll have conjugated linoleic acid and among other things in your brain to function really well, and then your output's going to be better. It's just the same thing, right? Chemical intake, food intake changes your output, right? So thinking about optimizing performance with that framework of like, I just want to be better. I just want to perform better, and I don't want neurodegeneration, looking at dementia and Alzheimer's and all these things that happen. That's not normal. It's not normal for you to forget things at 29. It's not normal for you to be reaching for words at 40 when you're trying to think of something. Trying to think about how you can optimize performance via supplementation or via either way chemical intake. I see supplementation and food intake as a very similar thing because they both convert to precursors and they both have this effect in your output. I think is a really good idea. So I think it's important to think about, okay, what are the things that I can, I think supplements are a big deal, right? If you can't get them in food, if you can't get the proper amount of stuff in food, if you can't get the proper amount of sunlight, vitamin D supplements, if you can't get the proper amount of choline, and I think you're going to have to eat like 10 eggs a day, really, with the demand, and a lot of grass-fed steak, which is going to make you full, it's going to have a lot of digestive processes happening, it's going to burn a lot of systems out, it's going to cause a lack of energy. If you can't get that much choline in food, which is really, really hard to do, then supplement with a choline supplement. Even Ray Kurzweil, the futurist and guy who talks about like living for a long time, defeated diabetes and reprogrammed his gene situation to not have heart disease like his dad did, and he was hereditarily like conditioned to have, and then beat it at 61. He suggests taking choline precursors, phosphatidylcholine specifically, and I think that's a really good idea. So binding with chemicals, binding with foods, and understanding that what you put, raw intake of whatever of those things is going to create a chemical condition that's going to relate to your output. It's all directly connected. And understanding as an entrepreneur, which already kind of makes you an advanced person, you're an elite person, you're building companies, you're taking much more of an initiative to build things and do things in life. You're probably spending a lot more time thinking, and you're doing a lot more advancing and a lot more evolution in your own brain and the things that you're creating. You're doing a lot more invention, too. Thinking about those things and being that optimal of a person, thinking about how you can optimize your brain functionality via supplementation and via really paying attention to brain function modulation via anything. Really food and supplementation, meditation, stress reduction, attention fragmentation reduction is a really important thing. So separate podcasts we should probably do about each one of those things and unpack a lot of stuff, especially attention fragmentation reduction. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. It's like what makes me focus better, what makes me function better is sustained attention. Right? It's not being hit up by everything. My phone is always on Do Not Disturb, and that's even with phone calls. I check it when I want to check it so that I'm not constantly having to be hit by tweets or direct messages or emails or etc. phone call, and then it has to take me off of what I'm doing. Because getting back on and getting into a zone where a lot of your neurology is kind of recruited to one task is really, really hard to do. So I think it's really important. So thanks for watching. I hope that makes sense. I know it's a lot to digest, but I think the intersection between entrepreneurship and brain function modulation is excitingly a very new part of what's happening now in the world of entrepreneurship, and undoubtedly a really important thing to think about moving forward. So tweet it if you loved it. Comment if you have something to say. I'd love to hear what other people are thinking about this and how this affects your life. If you have any questions, you want to talk about it, tweet it if you hated it too, and thanks for watching.